in the night. In today's video tutorial, I'm going to show you how to work up my sunset corner to corner panel blanket. This pattern I would say is suitable for an advanced beginner, and it's especially easy if you've already worked up a corner to corner blanket in the past. We'll use a self-striping yarn and work this blanket up in panels to get the unique color effect. Now, I'll pop in some video of the original colorway that I did, which was using a Caron cinnamon swirl cake in the color Mai Tai, and it made this beautiful sunset colored blanket. What's great about this pattern is you can use any self-striping yarn. In fact, I also worked this blanket up in a Caron latte cake, and you can see this here. This is the colorway Blueberry. And I just love the way the colors transition and give this kind of random color changing effect. It's really fun, and the best part about it is there's only 2 ends to weave in if you use a magic knot to join your cakes as you go. To get started, you're going to need some self-striping yarn. For my blanket, using the Mai Tai, I used 4 cakes of yarn, but I didn't use all of the 4th cake, and it came out to about 37 by 36. So you'll need 3 to 4 cakes depending what size you're going to make the blanket. I used a size I hook, but you can use whatever size hook fits the yarn that you're going to be working with. So this pattern works up in corner to corner panels, and you can see I started here, and you're going to use a panel that's 7 wide by however many tall you want your blanket to be. So here I've worked 1 panel and then 2 panels, and this is just the sample that I worked up for the tutorial. But if you're familiar with the corner to corner technique, you can skip through a lot of the first part of this tutorial. Just go ahead and work up your first panel. That's again 7 blocks wide by however tall you want the blanket to be. And I'll pop a timestamp on the screen so you can jump ahead to where we start panel 2, which is really where the fun begins and we start to create this kind of mismatched chevron pattern. Now, if you're into color control, just know that this pattern isn't going to completely match up. You could use separate skeins of yarn and control your colors, but if you're okay with a little bit of mismatch like the examples that I've shown, then I will give some color control tips towards the end of this video to make sure that each block is one color versus changing colors in the middle of a block, which might be more noticeable and a little bit more worrisome for somebody who is a little bit of a perfectionist like I am. This blanket is really suitable for anybody because you can make it any size. I donated the sunset colorway of my blanket to Project Linus, but you could easily work up this blanket for Boggy Creek or any other of a variety of charitable organizations, or just work it up for your friends or your family. It's a beautiful blanket. You can put any style border on it that you like. Let's go ahead and jump right into the pattern and get started. This project is worked up for the first panel as a traditional corner to corner, just you're doing a panel that is just 7 squares wide. If you already know how to do a corner to corner, feel free to skip ahead to a timestamp that I'll put on screen. This pattern uses a traditional corner to corner. I'll give you the basics of how to do that, but do look in the links below for a good resource on how to do a corner to corner. I'll start with a slip knot, insert my hook, and then I'm going to want to chain 3, and I like to pinch that chain and chain another 3. So now I have 6 chains on my hook. I'm going to double crochet into this one that I pinched. So that's counting back 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll double crochet into that stitch. And double crochet into the next 2. That forms our first block. Now I want to increase, so I'll chain 3 and pinch, chain 3 again, and just like we did for our first square, I'll go back in to where I pinched, the 4th chain from the hook, double crochet into that one, and double crochet into the next 2. So now we have these 2 blocks, this one here and this one here, we have this initial chain 3 space that we had. So what I'll do is flip it up, insert my hook into the space, and just slip stitch. Now we have 2 blocks. I'll chain 3 and place 3 double crochets into this space. So now we have the first row and the second row. All right, let's go for row 3. We're going to repeat again, chain 3 and pinch, chain 3 more, double crochet into the 4th chain from the hook, or that's the 3rd chain that you created where you pinched it down, double crochet into the next 2, and then slip stitch into this space. So you're just stacking this brick on top of this one. And now for the center stitches, you're always just going to work chain 3 and 3 double crochets into the middle. Don't worry about where the color changes. Just go ahead and slip stitch and then repeat for this next brick. Then you're going to continue increasing until you are 7 tall and 7 wide. So this is going to be row 1 has 1 brick, row 2 has 2 bricks, row 3 has 3 bricks, and it will continue in that manner. So when you reach row 7, you'll have 7 bricks. I'm going to go ahead and do row 4 for you, but please feel free to use the timestamps if you'd like to skip ahead. All right, for row 4, again, we're going to chain 3, pinch, chain 3 more, double crochet in the 4th chain from the hook. So 1, 2, 3, that's where we pinched. And double crochet in the next 2. So we'll go here and then here. Now we'll rotate and slip stitch so that the blocks are stacked on top of each other. Then we'll chain 3 and place 3 double crochets into the same space right here. 1, 2, 3. Slip stitch, chain 3, and place 3 double crochets. 1, 2, 3, slip stitch, chain 3, and place 3 double crochets. So keep working like that until you reach row 7, and I'll meet you back. So I've got my row of 7. This is the 7th row. And now what you'll want to do is for row 8, you're going to increase just as you have been doing on this side and decrease on this side. I'll go ahead and do my increase and work row 8 back up, and I'll meet you back at the end of this corner so that you can see how to decrease. Now I've reached the end of row 8. I'm going to go ahead and work this block as normal. So chain 3 and place 3 double crochets in that space. slip stitch. Now on this side we want to decrease, so we're not going to work another block here. Instead we're going to turn our work, slip stitch into the top of these 3 double crochets, slip stitch into this chain 3 space, go ahead and chain 3, and now work 3 double crochets into the top of this stitch. And then you'll continue up the row just as you normally would. If you're enjoying this pattern, drop a comment below. Let me know what colorway you plan on using for your blanket, what yarn. I'd love to hear from you. So you can see here how this row is going to start to straighten out. And on this side, we'll continue to increase as we go. So we'll always decrease on this row, and then we'll always increase on this row. And if you have trouble remembering or just want a reminder, each time you run your decrease, you can just pop a stitch marker in so that you remember that this is a decrease row, that you shouldn't be increasing, and that you'll only increase on this side. So continue to work your panel until your project is the height that you want your blanket to be. I'm going to go ahead and continue just to work this sample swatch, and I'll meet you back when we're ready to close up the rectangle and finish off this first panel. And again, once you reach this side with the stitch marker, you know that that's a decrease row, so you're going to just slip stitch into the chain 3 space, turn your work, slip stitch along the top of the 3 double crochets from the adjacent block, slip stitch into the chain 3 space, chain 3, and then continue working your project. On the decrease side, there is no increase, so you're just working into the chain 3 space. Now, if you do need to use a stitch marker to keep track of which side is the decrease side to make sure that you're not increasing on both sides, it's probably a good idea to go ahead and move this stitch marker up just so that you'll have it right at the top when the next time you come back up. Again, I'm just building a swatch here for an example, but we have 7 across the bottom, and we've started decreasing along one side, and we've been increasing on another side. So you can see that this is a rectangle. Now, once my rectangle is the height that I want it to be, I'll go ahead and decrease on both sides. So I'll chain 3 here. Place 3 double crochets into that space, slip stitch into the chain 3 space, and again, we're going to start our decrease now to close up this side of our panel. Slip stitch across. By the time you reach your panel, you should be at the end of your panel, so once it's as high as you want it to be, you should be a pro at decreasing. So then it's just a matter of decreasing on both sides to close it up. So I'll go ahead and finish up closing this panel, and then I'll meet you back on the very last square when we make the opposite corner, because that can be a little bit tricky. We're going to finish that corner and then go straight into working the second panel. So I'll meet you right back. Okay, so now we've got our panel almost completed, and you can see the striping effect here, and we're at our last block. So I'm going to go ahead and turn, slip stitch across the top here, slip stitch into the chain 3 space, chain 3, work this last block, join with the slip stitch to the chain 3 space so that we're closing this project up. Now I want to turn my work and slip stitch back up to the corner. So just as you would for any other decrease. And then slip stitch into the corner. So now we have a block that is 7 wide by however tall we want our blanket to be. Again, you could use this for a blanket, you could use it for a pillowcase, a table runner, really anything. So for the blanket that I did 7 wide again, and then as tall as you want it to be. Now you could decrease the number, so the width of your panel. So for example, if I want to do a panel that was 5 wide, that would make these color blocks wider. So the Karen cinnamon swirl cakes have a decent size stripe, so I did find that 7 worked out pretty nicely for this. But if you had a cake or a yarn that had a longer striping pattern, you could go wider. Or if you had one that had a shorter striping sequence, you could go shorter. And again, you can play with that to see how it looks and how you like the stripe sequence. Now that we have this panel complete, I'm going to show you how to work the second panel, which is worked join as you go, which is something that makes this blanket really unique and kind of fun to work on, is that we get a chevron effect without having to cut our yarn or weave in a bunch of ends. So from here, we're going to go ahead and chain 3 and pinch and chain 3 more. So this is a standard increase, and then go ahead and work back into the 4th chain from your hook, which is the one that you pinched, and the next 2. Okay, and then you're going to rotate. Here's the last block of the first panel, and you can kind of see if you pull the spaces in between. We're going to attach the first block that we created to the center. So I'm just going to locate the space in between the 2 blocks, insert my hook and slip stitch. Now I'm going to chain 3 and slip stitch in between the next 2 blocks. Okay, now I'm going to chain 3 and turn my work. And now this chain 3 space that we have makes the perfect spot to go ahead and work our block into. So 1, 2, 3, slip stitch, chain 3, work 3 into this chain 3 space, and that's our first 3 stitches, or first 2 rows for the second panel. So 1, 2. Now we're going to go ahead anytime we're on this side, not the side that connects to our work, because we can't increase there anyway. So this kind of keeps you on the rail now to where you don't need a stitch marker. But on the opposite side, we're going to continue to increase until we have 7. So because the colors kind of blend together, now you can use this stitch marker that you had before, and I would insert it just where the panel starts, the second panel, so that when you're counting 7, you make sure that you have an accurate count. One of the things that I found that I would kind of mess up on is that I want each panel to be 7, and sometimes I would make a panel 8 just because it was harder to count how many I had already done because the colors stay the same. But because the colors stay the same, that makes the striping effect kind of fun. So from here, I'm going to work the third row of the second panel by chaining 3, pinch, chain 3 more, work my double crochets into the 4th, 5th, and 6 chains from the hook. Rotate, slip stitch into this chain 3 space, chain 3, work 3 double crochets, slip stitch into the next block, chain 3, 3 double crochets, okay, and now we're back at the same side where our first panel is. So again, we're going to locate that space between the block we're next to and the block above it, and I'm just going to place a slip stitch into there, chain 3, place a slip stitch in between the next 2 blocks, chain 3, turn my work, work 3 double crochets into that spot. And then continue on. So you'll continue working in that manner until you have 7 blocks. Again, I placed a stitch marker so I can see where my second panel began, because you can kind of see here these colors blend together. So I have 1, 2, 3. I'll continue working until I have 7, and then I'll flesh it out all the way up the side. So I'll meet you back when that's done. Depending on how tall your panel is, you might end your second panel or need to start decreasing on your second panel on a block where you just slip stitch and then slip stitch across the top. However, if you have to slip stitch and then extend, that's pretty easy to do as well. You're just going to slip stitch in. And again, if this were the last block, then I would just turn and slip stitch across. But because I need to go up 1 more block, what I'm going to do is chain 3, and then I want to get into the stitch at the top just to secure it a little more. So I'll slip stitch into the stitch versus into the space, and that'll just secure that side a little bit more. Chain 3 and turn, and then work back up just as you normally would. So here we are. I've finished now the second panel. So you can see that we started up here, and then we worked back and forth till we hit 7 rows. And then you work your panel as long as you want your project to be, or as tall, so however tall you want the blanket to be. Down at the end of that panel, you'll turn and work join as you go and go back up. Now we'll come back up here and work a third panel coming all the way down. It just so happens my color is going to change right at this panel. So whereas this one persisted the yellow across, this one won't. And I love how that just varies the way the blanket looks. And again, we had 7 across, and then however tall we want the blanket to be. And then you'll continue working panels until the blanket is as wide as you want it to be. Now the stripes don't match up perfectly, the chevrons, but I think it really gives the blanket a neat appearance. And especially since most striped cakes are already well color coordinated, and it looks really good. So for this corner that we need to work back down, I'll just show you one more time how to work it. Now again, I ended my corner and then I slip stitched across. So I'm going to chain 3 and pinch, chain 3 more, double crochet in the 4th chain from the hook, which is where I pinched, double crochet in the next 2, Now it's important when you're turning that you pay attention which way you're turning, because if you turn this way, you're going to be working your blanket up and across. I actually am working on a blanket pattern where we do this pattern in squares, join as you go, but that's not this blanket. So for this blanket again, your panels would be super long already all the way down. And then so you're going to want to turn so that you're working down again. And again, to start your next one, you're going to do the chain 3, slip stitch in between blocks, chain 3, turn your work, and place 3 double crochets in that chain 3 spot. And that's all there is to it. Once you work the whole blanket, you should have something similar to what I have in my pattern. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments below. I will try to get back to any questions that are asked. One thing I wanted to note is that if you're making a large blanket like I did, at some point you'll need to add in a second cake. And what I did when I was changing colors was I used the magic knot, and I just made sure, again, this is based on panels that are 7 wide. I just made sure that I had enough of the previous color to have 2 blocks on each side at least. So here we have 4 blocks, 1, 2, 3, 4, and up here we have 2. So I would have switched color on any of these middle blocks so long as there was at least 2 on the side. And I probably would have wanted to do it somewhere here in the middle, like 1, 2, one of these 3, not these first 2. And that's just to kind of give consistency, and then it would change color going back around. I also didn't worry about making sure that the colorways matched, meaning that if I ended on a peach, which looks like the way that I'm working the cakes transitions into this kind of purpley pink color, I wouldn't go and make sure that I was starting with a purpley pink color. I would just grab whatever I had out of the middle, which looks like an orangey color, as long as it wasn't the exact same color I was leaving off on, which is this peach. Like, so even if it started with this orange, I would just join it in and then work it back up. And I think that adds some variety. Of course, you can do it however you like, but I just found with this pattern, it really doesn't matter that much. And I'll show you, I just found with this pattern, it really doesn't matter that much. One thing to note is if you are getting a color change in the middle of the block, like here we're going from pink to orange, sometimes that can be visible in your project, and you can get a cleaner looking blanket if you just adjust your tension when that happens. So to do that, what I'll typically do is take a look at where in the block this is happening, and then adjust my tension looser or tighter based on that. So this is happening kind of late in the block. It's part of this stitch and then the whole last stitch. So I know that if I back up 1 to 2 blocks, I can tighten my tension and push it so that this orange color most likely starts in the next block. Likewise, if it had changed color maybe in here, I would loosen up my tension and just have this block be orange. Just keep in mind that you don't have to worry about the chain 3, because when you come back up, you're going to crochet into the chain 3, so it doesn't matter what color that is. So you're really just, if you want to color control a little bit more, even though I use the term color control loosely, we're not cutting the yarn, you are just worried about these 3 stitches, not the initial chain 3. So let's take a look at what that looks like. I'm going to back this up. And then just crochet a little bit tighter than I normally would. I can get in there. Okay, so I tighten that up, but you can see it's still, I've got one post, so I need to back up one more square. As your project goes, you'll kind of get familiar with how to do this. I'm going to go ahead and back up here, adjust my tension, and I'll be right back and show you what the finished result is. Okay, that's a lot better. So you can see there's a little tiny bit there, but that won't be noticeable, but I tightened up the tension, and so now this whole next block will be orange. So that's one tip. Again, in the grand scheme of the whole project, you probably won't be able to notice it. The reality is most of us crocheters are giving these gifts to people who don't themselves crochet and would never even notice the block was partially one color or another. But that's just kind of how I like to correct for this situation here, where you have a rogue color in the middle of two otherwise solid colored blocks. Here's an example of a color change in a block that would be okay. So again, this is only if you're worried about the blocks all being a solid color. In this case, we can see that this chain 3 leg is a different color, and then we switch into this bright pink for the rest of the block. That'll be okay, and I'll show you in just a minute when I work back down. But because we're going to crochet into this chain 3 and cover it up, and because these panels are so small, it will be the same color. Now this may not work out if you have a striped yarn that uses a different, like has a shorter stripe pattern, but for the Karen cinnamon swirl cakes, Karen latte cakes, that kind of thing, this definitely works to where the panel's narrow enough that you don't have to worry about it. When you come back up here, it's going to be the same pink color and it's going to look okay. So let me work up and work back down and I'll show you. So here we're back at that same spot. And you can see I've slip stitched in and chained up 3. And now when I work my double crochets, that peach colored yarn is going to be covered. So again, it's not a big deal as long as it's just a chain 3. And if I were worried about that tiny little bit, which I'm not, I could have just loosened my tension just a little bit so that that wouldn't be there. But you can see that gets covered up and it's mostly a solid block. So again, you can just play with your tension, tighter or looser, if you really want the blocks to be completely solid. But even if there is a little bit of variation, it tends to not be that noticeable, but you can work around it if you want to. Thank you so much for watching my tutorial. If you have any questions at all, drop them in the comments below and I'll do my best to get back to you. If you haven't done so already, give this video a like, hit the subscribe button, and click the bell to get notified every time I release a new video. Until next time, keep calm and crochet on.